Good evening, and welcome to all our listeners out there. Thank you again for joining us in XY Spark. This is your boy Rolando, and this evening we are so excited that you have decided to be a part of the XY Spark conversation and to share in this rich experience that we're about to have. This evening, I'm so
Yes,
excited.
indeed.
I am so excited because I have a wonderful human being, a great person who's joining us to talk to us this evening about a wonderful, wonderful journey. Our topic this evening is the story
Mm,
of survival, recovery, and
mm,
healthy masculinity. And we have
yes.
none other than Dr. Morgan, Donald Morgan. He goes affectionately by the name of Skip, which he prefers to be called, and he has decided to join us this evening. Skip, welcome.
Thank you, Rolando. I am delighted to be here with you, my friend.
I'm glad you took the time out of your schedule to be here. Guys, let me tell you, I hope that you are fastening your seatbelts tonight because Skip has a story. I'm telling you, Skip and I connected, we chatted, and I'm telling him I'm so inspired to hear his story. He's an author, he's a veteran, he's a medical doctor, he's a spiritual person, he has had his experience. Listen, tonight we are going to bring you the combo. Okay, and I want you guys to know, when you go to Burger King and you order a double Whopper, well, this is a double
Ah!
Whopper.
Okay. I'm going to
Okay.
take off my glasses since we're getting that reflection here.
Okay. So, Skip, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I grew up the third of 8 children. I have two older sisters, four younger brothers. I grew up in a chaotic family. My early years were very traumatic. My father came back from the Korean War a broken man. Everybody tells me the man that went to war was not the man that came home. He was abusive towards my mother, which I don't recall, but my oldest sister says we'd run and hide when my dad would come home because we didn't know which dad was coming home, the kind, gentle, fun loving dad, or the angry, abusive dad. He unfortunately not only suffered from alcoholism, but I'm convinced he was bipolar and would become psychotic. He would lose contact with reality. He would be gone for days and sometimes weeks at a time, my mother would say, and not know, wouldn't, she wouldn't know where he was at. He gambled our car away. He did things that certainly speak of bipolar disorder. In those days, they diagnosed him with schizophrenia. They didn't have even bipolar wasn't even a diagnosis in those days in the 50s and 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and treatment was limited.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was my early childhood. I
Mm-hmm.
was bullied as a child. I was the smallest kid in my class.
Mm-hmm.
I was small. I was shy. I was awkward socially
Mm-hmm.
and very much physically.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my early years.
Wow, 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 wow. Skip, we have just started our conversation, and already, we are hearing things that a lot of men uh, can relate to. And so we are very excited, and we just want to say to you again how grateful we are that you have decided to come and share your story. So you told us about your childhood, told us about growing up in a home where there was dysfunction, and how did you, I mean, high school years, you talked about bullying. How did you survive that? Tell us.
How did I survive? Well, in the early years, back when I was a kid, bullying wasn't a concept. You were picked on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. I didn't think to tell a teacher, think to tell anybody, didn't go home and tell my mother or grandmother. I just dealt with it. I didn't want to be pushed around, so I'd open my mouth. These very kids, and I'd take a beating. But I wasn't going to have them pushing me around. That was the way of life. But I took many a beating.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I dealt with it, just on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was 13, because I had failed miserably at any sport up to that time, basketball, football, softball, baseball, gymnastics. I tell people I failed at tetherball. And you name it, I was pathetic at it. But in 8th grade, I went out for wrestling. And it was the first time I ever had this sense, I think I can be good at this. After a few practices, I think I can really be good at this.
Wow.
And that gave me self-confidence. That gave me a new sense of power, and the bullies left me alone. I wasn't big. I was wrestled at the lowest weight class as an 8th grader, 85 pounds. In high school, I wrestled at one of the lowest weight classes, 112 pounds. But after I started wrestling, the bullies left me alone.
Wow.
I would joke with my brothers many years later. We were all wrestlers. My brothers are much bigger than I am. And I'd say, where were the bullies in? Bring them on. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. Skip, that's a huge shift, eh? You left sport, you left all the sports, and you went into wrestling.
Yes.
What inspired you to go into wrestling? Because I'm interested
Well,
to hear.
I'm not sure what made me go out for practice initially. I'd heard about it, but I'd failed at every other sport I'd ever tried. So I'd heard about it. I think what happened when I was in 7th grade, I had tried gymnastics, but I'd see these kids that had gone out for wrestling, and they'd come into the gym while we were practicing gymnastics. And they would be doing some sprints and doing some running in the gym. And they'd have their wrestling gear on, and the coach would be making them do these running drills. And I thought, wrestling. And I'd see kids of all different sizes. And it piqued my interest. And I thought, gee, what if I had gone out for wrestling? So I think that's what planted the seed initially. It was kids at different sizes. And so in 8th grade, and in fact, you asked me this question. It's the first time I've ever put this piece together. I think that seed was planted back there in 7th grade. I get to 8th grade. I'd never had a success in any sport. And, I don't have to compete against these boys that are so much bigger than I am. Now we've got a level playing field. I'm competing against boys in my own weight class. And I think that's one of the things that prompted me to go into wrestling.
Wow. Skip, that's such a powerful. Here's what I admire about your story. Many young men now, and even men who are in their 20s or 30s, they have this mentality that I fail at so much things. Why try something new? While your story is so much different, because you say, Rolando, I failed at everything, but I was still determined to find something that I was good at. And that is such a powerful show of resiliency and determination and purpose. As I'm listening to you, I'm remembering Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Life. It's like you were driven and you wanted to get somewhere, so that's powerful, Skip. Thank you. So you went into wrestling, you did that. Then what next happened? What happened next after high school?
Well, just to sum up my high school wrestling career, I started off in 8th grade. I didn't win a match in 8th grade. I was the only 8th grader on the varsity team. 9th grade, I was the best wrestler in the wrestling room, but I still didn't win a match because they get so worked up the night before a match.
Yeah.
I didn't get any sleep. I just toss and turn all night long. Then I'd be so exhausted the next day, I'd go out and couldn't perform on the mat. But the summer after that, I won my first state freestyle tournament, one of the Olympic styles. And I had a very illustrious high school career, graduated after 2 district championships, state runner-up, and won multiple state freestyle championships, placed in 2 national freestyle championships. And I graduated as an honorable mention All-American in high school. So I had a very, very stellar high school career from a kid who couldn't do anything at that point.
Wow.
So you mentioned resilience, and certainly resilience is a big part of my story. So high school, I graduate from high school. I go to the University of Notre Dame on a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship. And that transition to college was difficult on a couple counts. I was very much in love with a young lady that was still back in Colorado. I'm a freshman at the University of Notre Dame. I'm in wrestling, but my wrestling's not up to par. My academics aren't up to par. I was a stellar student in high school, a stellar wrestler. Neither of these things are, up to par. So I'm struggling on that front. I'm homesick. I'm lovesick, and I'm very close to my family. My family and I are very, very close. I'm missing my family. And what I realized in retrospect, after many, many, many decades actually, is that first semester I was depressed.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize it. And the other thing that affected me as the semester wore on, the University of Notre Dame is a gorgeous campus. I mean, beautiful until the rains start. And then the rains start. And the rains continue. And then and then it gets just gray and overcast as the winter comes on. And you have, days and days and days and days where it's just gray and cold and windy. And the late summer, beautiful vegetation, all these colors, and the fall, the glorious colors and so forth. And then, like I said, the rain, and then the overcast, and then the winter, the overcast, bitter cold, wind. And I was lonely. And I realized I also suffer from seasonal affective disorder, that when I don't get sun, again, I didn't realize that back then. And it's, later in my adult years, that don't see sunlight, don't get sun. It's dark and overcast.
Yeah.
And all of these factors were working against me.
Oh, wow.
And had it not been for some other Christian brothers and sisters there that were in a Catholic charismatic community, that took me under their wing, I would have left after that first semester and transferred back home. If they hadn't reached out to me at that time, and another group of Christians that I was involved with, I would have said, I'm going back home. I'm transferring University of Colorado or some other university close to home. I just can't do this. So
what made you stay? You said you had people surrounding you, but outside of that, because there you are, you're homesick, you're lovesick, you're wrestling, but you're not really in it. You're doing academia, but it's like that song that says, your body's here, but your mind is on the other side of town. It's so like that was what was going on with you. So you had healthy people surrounding you. And you said that encouraged you, that gave you that sort of a wraparound support, and kind
it
of
gave me
pushed you forward.
some, yeah, but I was still very lonely. But certainly that helped. Without that, I wouldn't have lasted a semester. I'm certain of that.
What did you study in high school?
What made me study, you say?
What were you studying? What
I
was
was studying, courses to get me into college with the intention that I was going to do pre-med. So I was pre-med there at University of Notre Dame. And I think I stayed again because of that resilience, that idea that, we have this mentality as a wrestler. I took on this mentality as a tough guy. Don't give up.
Yes.
You work hard. You keep pushing.
Yes.
We have this term, gut it out. Meaning know how much it hurts, no matter how hard it is. You just keep pushing. Your lungs maybe feel like they're going to explode. They burn so badly. Your muscles ache so much. You may be cramping, and every fiber of your being and your mind, your body, everything is saying stop, just stop. But as a wrestler, that mentality is no, I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing. And so partly it was that mentality. It was also that mentality of, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you I can do this, because I was bullied, because I also understood in high school, although as a stellar student, I came to understand I'm not as bright, innately as bright in some areas as other kids. I don't get me wrong, I'm a very bright man, but in certain areas, math being one of those, I'm not as bright as
Yeah.
some of my counterparts here in certain areas. That I'd hear a good friend of mine, we'd be in class, teacher would ask a question, they were spouting it off, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Huh? Where'd you come up with that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
but I understood, okay, nobody's going to outwork me. That was the mentality I had. Okay, you might be smarter, even on the wrestling mat. I understood I don't have the athletic giftedness. I'm not as strong. I'm not as fast. I'm not as
Right.
coordinated
Yeah.
as these kids that I knew was going to compete against, but I had determined you are not going to outwork me. And that was the mentality I went through life with. No, you're not going to outwork me. And that'll get you through a lot of things, but it's also that double sword that got me into trouble at different points in my life too. So that's, I think, part of what it is. I started this, I'm going to see it through, and I persist.
Wow, wow, what a story! What a story, Skip, man. That's really inspiring. So you mentioned something. Got it out. You know, uh, and that's something I believe that I would want us to sort of look at a little bit more, because today in our modern world, the gutting out has been taken to another level where men are not talking about their feelings. Men are not
Mm.
acknowledging that, hey, I'm depressed. You said, you know what? I didn't realize back then, but I was depressed. And right now we're in the month of May. It's mental health awareness
Yes, yes.
over here in Canada. I don't know if it's the
Hmm.
same thing where you are.
Yeah, it
and
is.
and so, and so how does that go hand to hand as we talk about healthy masculinity and gutting things out? Does that take away from the gutting out of what a male is? So how do we balance that from your own experience? What advice would you give to a young man now that is tuned into XY Spark about confronting a mental health challenge?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, Rolando. Since we last chatted, I came across a study and something I was reading by a renowned psychologist. But I've had this understanding that part of the reason we get into trouble as men in regards to mental health and not seeking help for mental health issues is because we've lost touch with our emotions. We grew up with this idea, don't be a sissy, don't cry, don't be a wimp, be a man. You're telling a 5, 6-year-old kid, an 8-year-old kid, an 11-year-old kid this. When you're 21 years old, you're still trying to figure out what is it to be a man. And we're telling a kid this kind of thing. And so we grow up suppressing our emotions. Plus, we don't see it modeled by other men. How to identify your emotions. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I feel rejected. I'm frustrated. I'm irritated. I'm confused. You don't see that modeled, much less in the popular media. What kind of men do we see? The macho man, the independent, tough guy that doesn't need anybody to get things done, to make it through life. That's what we grew up with. So all of those factors, this idea of expressing emotions. And so growing up, I think as men, we had this limited array of emotions that we knew how to express because we had so suppressed and lost contact with our emotions. Elation, yeah, go team, yeah, that was great, way to go. Love and anger. That was about the full array of emotions we learned to express, because all those other negative emotions, loneliness, sadness, frustration, irritation, rejection,
Fear.
yes, all of those things. We didn't know how to identify, much less how to express, how to put words to them. And so we grew up emotionally stifled. So I've been saying this for a matter of years. I came across this concept, and Robert F. Levant, he used to be former president of the American Psychological Association. So back in the early 2000s, he coined this phrase, normative male alexithymia.
Mm.
Literally means emotions without words.
Oh wow.
Not being able to put words to your feelings. And when I read this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I've been saying. This was my experience. This is what I've been telling others. Men do not know how to identify their feelings because we so suppress them, much less, so we don't know how to identify them, much less how to express them. Normative male alexithymia. It's in the psychological literature. When I read that, I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's here. Because I've been talking about this. So that's one of the things I would say to men is, yes, there's duality in terms of maleness, that men are not women. And boys need men in their lives, real men in their lives, to teach them what a man is. They can have the most loving, the most amazing women in their lives, but they still need men to teach them how to be a man. You have this aspect of a man, that strong provider, protector, lover, decisive. You have that part of the man. He will take you out if you go to harm those he loves. But he'll work himself to the bones to make sure those he loves are provided for. Then you have this other side that has been so denied, squelched, suppressed in men, of tenderness, of being able to express, I'm sad today. I feel rejected when the way that person treated me. That really hurt me. That person who I thought was my friend won't have anything to do with me. They simply cut off all ties for no explanation. I thought we were good friends. Why do they ghost me now? They simply won't answer my calls. I've sent them a letter, card. They won't even acknowledge me. I'm sad today. I'm confused. I'm lonely. All these gamuts, being able to identify what you're feeling and being able to express it, being able to even cry. How often do we allow ourselves as men to cry? Because that sense that it's weak, you're a wimp to cry. But that's a normal emotion. But we're so out of touch with that. How often do we allow ourselves as men, when we grieve, when we're sad, when we hurt, to cry? So there's those two aspects to masculinity. And it's only a man who's in touch with both of those sides of masculinity and that is secure in both of those, that can model those and teach a boy how to be a man.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Wow, Skip. Skip, for those who are just joining us, you may be joining us on Facebook Live or on YouTube. Our guest this evening is none other than Dr. Skip Skip Morgan. Okay, he likes to go by the name Skip.
Mondragon.
Okay, Doctor.
Mondragon.
Yes, okay, Dr. Skip Mondragon, and he is sharing with us some really powerful thoughts. So thank you for joining us. And if you have a comment, please feel free to write a comment there in the chat box, and we're willing to have that chat with you. We're going to make another segue now with Skip. Skip also spent some time as a medical doctor in the army. Okay. Tell us, how did you practice healthy masculinity as you were engaged? You went on some you were deployed to in some areas. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you survive
Yes.
that?
Well, understand as a physician, you are a caretaker. And excuse me, my philosophy with medicine has always been that you treat body, soul, and spirit. So body, mind, will, and emotions, and spirit. That when one part is hurting, every part is hurting. That we are a tri-part being, body, soul, and spirit. This has always been my philosophy in medicine. As an Army physician, so I spent 26 and a half years in the Army, and Rolando is referring to being deployed. I was deployed 37 months, 30 months in combat zones. That, yes, you're soldiers. And yes, I moved up in rank to the eventual rank of colonel. But I took care of soldiers. I took care of when we were in garrison, so back home in hospitals, I took care of their dependents, their family members, and I took care of retirees and their dependents, adult patients. So I'm an adult medicine specialist. So how do you do that and practice healthy masculinity? Well, first, you practice good medicine. But practicing good medicine means you always try to be respectful. You try to be kind and gracious. And I know I fell short of that at times, but that was my intent, to treat every patient with kindness, with respect, and to give them the very best treatment possible, to ensure they got the very, very best medical care that they could get. That was my commitment.
Yes.
I would very frequently, almost universally with my patients, I would ask, may I pray with you? And almost universally, patients would say, sure, doc, I would love that. Except the last few years I was in the Army, and I saw a very distinct shift in that there were patients. I could only count up to that point when there were only a few patients. But in my last couple of years in the Army, it became more frequent. No, doc, I'm not comfortable with that. No, I prefer you not to do that. So I saw this very distinct shift from that, where people were very open to it and very appreciative. I even had patients of mine who were regular patients of mine, and they would ask, doctor, would you please pray with me? I'd be in a hurry sometimes and thinking I've got to get on to my next patient. And the patient would say, doctor, before you go, would you please pray with me? And many times before leaving that room, I'd realize that was the most important part of the visit. Of anything I did, was that. Was that part of the visit. Was that human connection, that heart connection, that spirit connection when we prayed. That's sometimes I did more for my patients doing that than anything else that I did for them.
Wow. Thank you.
And of course, when patients are dying, when they've got a terminal disease, and you're discussing death and dying with them and their family. Again, that's where you can bring the light of Christ. And you don't even have to mention the gospel of Jesus Christ. Although, as I got to know patients better, I could bring up spiritual matters appropriately, understanding that there's this power and this rank structure. When you have the word doctor before your name, and then you walk in a military facility and you've got the rank of colonel on either on your shoulders or depending on the uniform right here, that gives you power. And so you have to be wise how you use that. And not to use that as a battering ram, but rather as an entree to reach out to people.
Mm-hmm.
So in appropriate fashion with some patients, I would discuss, their spiritual beliefs with them. And certainly I would pray with them and the family at the bedside as they were dying or after they had taken their last breath. I'll pray for wisdom for all of us in deciding on how we were going to proceed. But I can't tell you the number of discussions that I had to have with a patient with a terminal disease. And then with that discussion with the patient and then with their family, here are the options. Here's what I would recommend. Give them the options, get their opinions, especially the patients, the family, and then they'd usually look to me and they'd say, "Doctor, what would you recommend? What do you recommend?" And then I could give them my recommendations. And then we'd go from there. But I've had those kind of discussions hundreds of times.
Wow, wow. One of our listeners are saying thank you for your service, Skip. So someone out there is recognizing the 26 years and you've give back. And I also wanted to join in that and say thank you as well for the
You're
service.
welcome.
You
It
know,
was my
uh,
pleasure and honor.
we want to now talk a little bit. You're an author, okay? You're an author, and you wrote this really interesting book. Now, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write that book and what is it all about?
Wrestling depression is not for wimps. I actually got a copy right here. You see
Mm,
my little gold sticker down there.
yeah.
Last week I received notice that my book is an International Book Award winner. That was the
Wow.
sticker I put on there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Wrestling depression is not for wimps.
Mm-hmm.
It's written for men. It's written in short, easy to read chapters. It's written in layman's terms. It's
Mm-hmm.
written with lots of practical advice to help men who are depressed, to help them in their recovery, but also to help maintain their health and well-being. Advice that they can put into practice today.
Mm,
But
mm,
why did I write it? Well, when I was depressed, and I was still struggling, and for 10 plus months, so I was about 6 weeks into my recovery, and my prayers up to this point have been, "Lord, please, oh, Lord, please, please deliver me from this darkness." And I had been struggling. And one of the people that had been very close contact through all this ordeal was my youngest brother, Chris. And Chris, I call my alter ego. Chris and I are very, very close. And he called, and he was very excited. He had been to a Bible study with evangelist Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham. And Franklin had been in Raleigh, North Carolina to lead a Bible study with a group of men there. And the Bible study was about suffering. And Franklin shared with these men, why should we, as Christians, think we don't have to suffer? Particularly as Western Christians. Christ suffered horrendous brutality. He suffered for us in so many ways. Spirit, soul, and body. Suffering he took, and that horrific suffering on the cross. So why do we think we should not have to suffer?
mm-hmm.
And I had had those prayers, please, please, Lord, deliver me. And I was in that deep, dark pit. And it brought back to mind, after Chris said that to me, the scripture in Philippians 3:10. Paul writes, "Oh, that I might know him, the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his sufferings. I knew that scripture. I knew it well. I had prayed it hundreds, if not thousands of times in my walk with Christ. But in my suffering, all I could pray was, Lord, please deliver me. But over the course of 2 days, my prayer shifted. The Lord, what would you have me learn from this, and how can I use it to help others? It was an epiphany. And I understood there that if I needed to live with this suffering, I could. I understood that God was there with me. He was in that suffering with me. That he understood that suffering. That I could, if I had to. I didn't want to, believe you me. But if I had to, I could. But I also understood that I had a gift here. That this was a gift. And I needed to share it. I was compelled to share it. So I started writing what I had learned and what I was learning with the intention I was going to share this. So before I left the Army, so later that year before we signed out on transition leave from Eisenhower Army Medical Center, I shared with the hospital staff at large 2 different sessions about my story, the lessons I learned, to encourage others who were struggling. Go get help. Don't suffer in silence. And preventative
Can you say
measures.
that again, Skip? Can you say that again?
Yeah. Don't suffer in silence. Go get help.
That is a powerful message right there, Skip. Because I'm passionate about that, Skip. Being in a mental health myself, that's been my encouragement to men that mental health is not a myth. And if you're
No.
struggling with it, go get help. So thank you for saying that. Really appreciate that. Really
And
appreciate that.
that talk and those notes, that became the genesis of my book. Because after I left the Army, then I looked for opportunities to share my message. Small stages and large, they were live
Yeah.
in those years. And then, of course, now the last year and a half, a lot of virtual stages to share my message. But that became the genesis for Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps.
Wow. Thank you.
And the
Thank you.
title was born out of my experience with wrestling and the life lessons wrestling taught me. So I take anecdotes from my wrestling experience and those life lessons and apply it to recovering from depression or preventative measures so you don't
Yes.
end up depressed.
Yes. 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 That's great. Thank you so much, Skip. You know, Skip, we don't want to keep you all night, man. I think you have given us so many nuggets already. You know, I don't know. Is there, if there is one sentence of empowerment that you would want to leave with the XY Spark family, the men out there who are listening, those who are going to listen to this later on YouTube, what would be that one sentence of encouragement and empowerment that you'd want to leave with the men that's in line with our topic, the story of survival, recovery, and healthy masculinity? What would that message be?
Psalm 3:3, the writer says, "But thou, Lord, are my glory, my shield, and the lifter of my head." So if your head is down, if you are downtrodden, if you are beat down, beat up, and begging to get off your back, realize you're not alone. You are not alone. You have family who love you. You have friends who love you. And most importantly, God loves you. So understand that you are not alone. So don't suffer in silence one more day. Go get help. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to those who love you.
Wow, thank you so much. Listen to me, brothers, you're out there listening. If you missed it, we're sorry, but you can catch it later. It will be live on Facebook. It will be on our Facebook page, the XY Spark. It will be on YouTube. Our guest was Doctor Skip Mondragon. He goes Skip affectionately, and I'm telling you guys, you missed a powerful interview. But we're happy for technology. You can catch it later. Okay, share this story about surviving. He shared this story about his youth, traumatic
Mm,
past, his high school years. He shared about his experience in the army. He gave us an important piece as it relates to healthy masculinity,
mm,
and he shared from his own research discovery one of the past president of the American Psychological Association, he discovered. And Skip, could you remind us of that term that you used?
normative male alexithymia.
Guys, you've got to catch it.
Emotions without words.
Guys, if you want to catch it, you can catch it again. You can rewind, you can listen to it, you can write it down. I'm not even going to try to repeat it myself until I read it a couple of times. But it's very important. Normative, is what he's saying. And guys, emotion without words, in a nutshell, is the meaning of that expression. And so, if you are out there and you're a male, remember the punchline of Skip's appeal is you're not alone, don't suffer in silence, go out there and do it. Guys, listen, we thank you for joining our live. Skip, listen, we are going to invite you to come again because we really
Oh,
want to
please.
tell you
I'd love to.
that we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you for the service that you've given to your country and to the community and the many lives that you've touched and continue to
Mm.
touch. And your book, we've already ordered a copy. We're waiting for it to come because we're excited to get into it and see some of those stories. But we want you to know we appreciate you. And
Thank you, Rolando.
listen, let us not be strangers
Yes,
because
sir.
we think that you have a lot to give. And at XY Spark, before you go, I want to extend to you what we call our right hand of fellowship or welcome badge to the XY Spark family. I let you know that you're always welcome here.
Thank
In the
you,
me-
Rolando.
in the meantime, guys, this is your boy Rolando on XY Spark. Thank you for joining us. And as usual, we will see you again next time. You guys have a great night and keep safe.